This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Not quite as fun of a week for college football this week as we've had the past couple, but still some really big games with Power 5 teams trying to remain undefeated in somewhat tough matches. We're going to break down if they can do that with Austin Swaim today. He'll be swinging by to break down his thoughts on those big games and his favorite bets over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as I am each Wednesday by Dr. Ed Feng. Find his work over at thepowerrank.com. Ed, interesting week on tap for this week. We got some pretty interesting games. One in the Big Ten with Ohio State, Penn State. How you doing entering week number 9?
I'm doing well because Michigan State is so bad that they didn't even make your list of games to talk about this week.
How is that win total feeling for you?
I mean, didn't it hit already?
I think you might be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know. I haven't looked.
So you're saying that the mood in Ann Arbor is not pensive entering a game where they're 22.5-point favorites.
It's always a little pensive when it's a rivalry game.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's trying to remember that, but I don't know. It's a night game. It'll be interesting.
Those are always fun. At least like that makes it, at least if it's not going to be a good game, a fun game either way. As mentioned, we are joined here for today by Austin Swaim. You can find his work over at numberFire.com. Check him out on Twitter at aswaim3. Austin does write a lot of the college football betting guides for us over at numberFire. Austin, first time we've had you on the show here, though, not to talk UFC, which I feel like I dropped the ball on that, but we'll get you on to talk that at some point as well. How you doing today?
I'm good, Jim. Absolutely. I'd love to talk UFC. Had a huge card last week, but hey, we're talking about alumni's rooting interest. I went to Colorado, the CU Buffs, so I'm just glad they won a game at all this year. I've already pretty much walked in that I'm going to cash under 3 on the Buffs win total. My alumni's been in a better state.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bummer, man.
We're going to ignore mine as well. We're just going to pretend that one doesn't exist. Although quarterback changes, maybe that'll help things out on their end. But Austin, like I said, does a lot of work for us over at numberFire. Also does some podcasts for us, a UFC DFS podcast and other stuff over at numberFire as well. Find him on Twitter at AceWin3. We're going to pick Austin's brain about this week's slate and get you ready for some college football in week 9 in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We have podcasts up here every weekday on Covering the Spread and also on the FanDuel YouTube page. We talked about the World Series, Astros versus Phillies with Rob Friedman, pitching ninja yesterday, get his thoughts on that, and also ran through what my numbers are saying about NFL week number 8 and ran through 3 bets I like there. That's up on the podcast feed right now. Our NFL week 8 preview coming up tomorrow with the prop preview coming on Friday. Also, the NBA season is underway. It's the perfect time now to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in free bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel has all your favorite bets, from the money line to point spreads to player props. You can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Plus, with live betting, you'll get updated odds on games that have already started. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So download FanDuel today to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Make every moment more this season with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and in select states. First online real money wager only. Refund issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 or ksgamblinghelp.com. In Louisiana, 1-877-770-STOP. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text OPENY. In Tennessee, call the Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. In Wyoming, 1-800-522-4700 or in West Virginia, 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Let's dig in now to week number 9 in college football. And Austin, get a first overall overview of your process, because we've not had you on the show before. So I kind of want to get a read on how you do things, how you play things on the college side of things. What's the process look like for you before you place a bet on a weekly basis?
So a bulk of the work that I do for numberFire, as I'm sure you've seen, is in the daily fantasy realm. So I have a very I call it my super sheet that I have updated with market share concerns, different types of quarterbacks and players and profiles that I have in for each different offense. So when I look at a matchup, what I typically do is I take that information about which teams are explosive and which teams are successful at running the ball or passing the ball, and I convert that to basically kind of an efficiency grade. And what I do is I use then ESPN SP Plus analytical rankings, which are fantastic, by the way, as well as I use a combination of yards per play metrics and things like that to determine how much success each offense should have in the game, either running or throwing. And I can adjust that based on strength of schedule. We'll talk about strength of schedule a little bit later, where if you're 60th in the country in yards per play, but you've been facing a bunch of killers and a bunch of great quarterbacks, it's not that bad as far as a defensive unit is concerned. So I typically try to project offensive efficiency because that's what I'm good at. I'm not as good with the defensive stuff. And really, I feel like if I can get to a spot where I feel like one team's going to have the advantage against the other team's defense, both rushing and throwing the ball, I really like that as a spot that I can target. Now, where I really struggle with my betting process is spreads like larger than like 17, because if I'm looking at someone's offensive efficiency, I know Michigan is going to roll Hawaii, both running and throwing the ball. I don't know if it'll be by 49 points or 56. So that's kind of where I might be a little bit useless, but it's worked out okay so far.
Yeah, well, the good thing is like a lot of the spreads we had this week are not that large. They're still like decently up there, but not quite that bad. Are you betting totals then mostly for yourself? Because that, I think when I think of like overlap with daily fantasy, you do a lot of DFS work for numberFire. It's a lot of deciding which games will shoot out. And that is like having a totals based mindset. Do you find yourself shifting more that direction for the most part?
I definitely think it can help, but also it depends on what number I get. As far as if I feel like a team like last week in a bet that didn't hit, I felt like Kansas State was going to have an advantage both efficiently as far as their defense stopping TCU's rush and pass offense, and as well as Kansas State's offense having success running the ball against TCU. That didn't hit. Obviously, Kansas State's quarterback went out early in the game last week, but I feel like I can take a side if it's like a 3.5 point spread. I was on the Kansas State money line last week, but yeah, I do a lot with totals as well, as far as looking at seconds per play and pass play percentages, and what if a team is going through and they don't pass the ball very much, and either going into a difficult, brutal rushing matchup, then they're going to have a hard time moving the ball. And so I'll take a side there, but you're right. I definitely prefer totals in a lot of spaces.
Excellent. Let's look at some games for this weekend. We have a Big Ten matchup with Ohio State going to Penn State. Ohio State's a 15.5 point favorite, total about 60.5. Ohio State looks good and surprisingly good on the defensive side of the ball. Penn State, had a nice weekend last weekend. What are you seeing in this game?
So Ohio State's been a really difficult team for me too, because most people would agree they're the best offense in college football. As far as efficiency, you could argue running and passing as well. It's really hard to see how far they've separated from the rest of the pack, though, because I still generally favor these big spreads. I feel like these defensive stalwarts can cover them. Now, I took Notre Dame plus 17.5 to start the year against Ohio State. They covered. Clearly, Ohio State was rusty in that game. Smith-Njigba got hurt. But then I took Wisconsin plus 17.5 in Columbus, and that was a disaster. They were down by 30-something at halftime with the alleged top 10 defense in ESPN's SP Plus analytical rankings. And Wisconsin is a good defense, but that's how dynamic Ohio State is. And so it's really difficult for me to take a look at this spread and see how much Ohio State would actually impact as far as what they would look like in terms of covering the spread. But what I keep coming back to in this game, this is really Ohio State's first competitive road game of the year. Now, hypothetically competitive. Again, we had the Wisconsin snafu. But you look, they're traveling to College Station, and you have Penn State as allegedly that daunted number 9 defense again here. Absolutely, I think Penn State, their pass defense, they're 9th in yards per attempt as far as pass defense is concerned. That looks to profile well to stop Stroud, to stop Smith-Njigba, to stop Egbuka, but I don't really know. I kind of have a lean toward Penn State. I would take that side. I think this is a good number if you want to back Penn State, because you are getting more than the 2 touchdown buffer, and this is a situation we really haven't seen the Buckeyes in so far this year.
Do you feel good enough where you'd actually want to bet it, or is it more so a lean for you on that side?
That's more of a lean now. Now, if this number got to closer to like 17, just like that magic number I had against Wisconsin and Notre Dame, I'd be looking to actually wager it.
Okay, what's read on the total in this one? Because I think that's also pretty interesting, given what Ed was talking about with that Ohio State defense. They're they've been fun.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? 60.5 right now.
See, their Ohio State defense is better than expectation. And I think that's where we get enamored with their offense when looking at the total like this. I think Penn State's going to have a hard time scoring the ball here. Their rushing offense hasn't been what we've seen in previous years. And Sean Clifford, he's been really up and down. He's had some games this year where he's turned it over multiple times. And then he's also had some games where he threw in excess of 300 yards. It's hard to tell what you're going to get. You look at some of the other opponents that Ohio State has faced. They haven't been able to really move the ball. Notre Dame's quarterback situation, a mess. Wisconsin's is a mess. Iowa barely can generate first downs at a time here. I think Clifford is better than that, and they're at home here, but I still would probably lean toward the under because I think Ohio State's defense isn't getting enough credit in this spot as far as their ability to potentially shut down Penn State's offense here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like if you're a Penn State fan, you're kind of like, oh, the only thing worse than Sean Clifford is not having Sean Clifford, right?
Right.
Because they were bad when he was out last year. But, you know, there's like a clear ceiling there.
There is, and he's really missed Jahan Dotson, who's come into the NFL, caught a few touchdowns with the Commanders. He's really missed Dotson, who had a darn near 40% target share last year. Now they've been spreading it out. Tinsley, Parker, Washington, they've had some big plays, but none of them have emerged as that clear go-to guy for Clifford on his first read.
So let's move south a bit to talk about TCU at West Virginia. TCU is a 7.5 point favorite here. Total is 68.5 for this one. TCU has passed every test thus far. They played good football, but you know, West Virginia, they've had some clunkers, but they can play pretty well as well. Spread's still relatively tight here at 7.5. So what's your read on this one? TCU at WVU.
So I think from my world, from like the daily fantasy world, I look at West Virginia's individual parts of their offense, and I think there's a little something there. You know, they upset Baylor a couple of weeks ago. JT Daniels is a veteran quarterback that's had quality outings so far. Bryce Ford Wheaton's going to be an NFL guy on the outside. But when you look at this offense at the end of the day, they're 100th in yards per play. And I have a concern there against a TCU defense that against the pass and the rush by most categories is a top 50 defense, and they have played well. TCU's defense hasn't gotten enough credit for what they've done to Oklahoma State or to a Kansas State, even though we talked about the injury earlier. But TCU, the only problem I have with this game, and I still would wager on TCU in this spot, this number is not a good number, but in some ways, I think the book's hang 7.5 here, and you look at that number as maybe I should take TCU because I have a hard time seeing how West Virginia's defense slows down TCU whatsoever. Kendre Miller's averaging over 6 yards a carry. Quentin Johnston's basically unguardable. He's going to be probably a top 10, 12 pick in the NFL draft. And then Max Duggan can use his legs. He's used his legs in key spots to pick up first downs as well. And so if his passing efficiency isn't there, like it wasn't in the first half against Oklahoma State, then Duggan can absolutely contribute with his legs. So I don't know how West Virginia's defense holds here. The only problem is Morgantown is a brutal place to play. We saw that with Baylor. That result made no sense at all. And I think I'm looking at the over in this game as well, just like I was in that game between Baylor and West Virginia on Thursday night a couple of weeks ago, where when you kind of get in this spot where West Virginia has all these talented pieces, they will be motivated. That crowd is going to be rocking. I think this is a spot where West Virginia's offense can come out to play, but I also thought that last week, and they got throttled by Texas Tech. So a little bit of a tough sell on the Mountaineers, but I still favor the over, and I do like TCU, even though I don't get the best of the number there.
If you had to pick between the total and the side in this one, which one do you feel better about?
I would go with the spread. It's just because I'm very concerned about what happened last week because Texas Tech is a below average pass defense. I expected Daniels, and I don't know if I'm missing some key offensive line injuries or something because they just did not show up last week in Lubbock. And so I'm a little concerned if I'm missing something as far as what would keep West Virginia's offense from being as efficient as we saw it a couple of weeks ago.
All right, let's move down to the SEC. We have Tennessee Kentucky going to Tennessee. Tennessee's a minus 12.5 point favorite. Really interesting spot, right? Because they played Alabama last week, played Georgia next week.
Yeah.
I don't really believe in trap games, but it's an interesting situation. We have a total of 63.5. What are you seeing in this game?
Interesting because I kind of feel the same way. I don't really believe in trap games in college either because Tennessee, if they take a loss this weekend, it's a big deal as far as they're probably well set back in the college football playoff rankings. But so I think they are going to be focused here. And my first impression when I saw this spread, it's a good number to back Tennessee. As far as you're looking at expected value, if at 12.5, you're still keeping 13 and 14 in your range of outcomes. As far as if they won by 13 or 14 points, that would still be in the Tennessee column. So really, this is a key number, 13 and 14, especially in college where extra points are more automatic. Those are key numbers, and it hasn't moved there yet. So I think this is a good number to support Tennessee. And really, what I look at in this game, Kentucky during this latest stretch where they beat Mississippi State last week, where they were door-to-door with Ole Miss. They've really leaned on their star running back, Chris Rodriguez Jr. here. He's handled quite a few of the carries. I think 66.7% of total rushing attempts, and that includes Will Levis, who will take off and run as well. They have run through him. Now Tennessee, here you look defensively, their rush defense is outstanding. They're 7th in rush yards per attempt allowed. I know it doesn't feel that way because of what Alabama did to them, but they've been phenomenal in the rushing attack, and that's what really bottled Jaden Daniels up a couple of weeks ago. I really like the Vols at this number because I don't know how Kentucky's going to score. I just don't trust Will Levis because this is a play action offense. You look at their pass rate, just a 45.2% pass rate here. That is 86th in FBS. They start with Rodriguez and work from there. Now you ask Levis to be off script to carry the offense as well. Tennessee's pass defense isn't bad either. So I don't know if Kentucky's going to have an easy time putting up points in this one. I really typically don't like to lay double-digit favorites, either college or in the NFL. It's just a huge number. But I think because you still have 13 and 14 in the fold, I would lean Tennessee in this side. But when it comes to the total here, 62.5 points, I love the under in the spot. It's my favorite total that we've talked so far because because of what I talked about. I think Kentucky's going to have a hard time moving the ball here. To Kentucky's defense, by the way, also top 50 in ESPN's SP Plus rankings. So a little bit underrated in that regard. And 62.5 is a really lofty total, but Tennessee plays so fast that really totals with them can get out of hand really quickly.
Yeah, as mentioned, the total there is 62.5. The under is -110 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook for Kentucky at Tennessee. Let's open the board for you first, Austin, and see what else you like for week 9. Where else do you see in value for this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook?
So I want to start with a Thursday night contest. We actually have a good Thursday night slate, a couple of ranked teams in action here. Utah visiting Washington State. Pullman is a sneaky tough place to play out there in the middle of nowhere in Washington, and they have a really good home crowd. I love the Cougars getting 7 points in this spot as a home dog. When I look at Utah, I have a hard time trusting them with a number this big for a very specific reason. It's their defense. They're 111th in yards per play. Now, ESPN's giving them a lot more credit because they have so far faced UCLA, they faced USC, but they're still 42nd. It's not that dominant Kyle Whittingham defense that we're used to, and Washington State's got a lot of interesting pieces. Cam Ward, their sophomore quarterback, kind of a dual threat guy, can make plays on the run. They were within a score of Oregon. They probably should have beaten Oregon if not for a late notice Bo Nix Hail Mary. I like their ability to move the ball here. The Jenkins, the backup running back, because Nakia Watson is hurt, has actually been more effective yards per carry. So that might even be an upgrade for the Cougars in this spot. And then they have so many weapons. They have 8 different guys over 10 yards per attempt with at least 8 targets. So there are a lot of different guys making big plays here. They're a hard offense to defend. I think in this spot, I love the Cougars getting 7 points on Thursday.
Yeah, I think that one's pretty interesting too. So Washington State +7, the one that Austin likes there. Ed, what about for you? Where are you seeing some value this week in week number 9?
Yeah, so I want to get back to this Kentucky at Tennessee game. My numbers have this closer to Tennessee by 9 points. So that includes about a point that I'm giving Kentucky because they are coming off a bye from last week, and Tennessee clearly did not have a bye last week. And also the other thing is that my numbers are probably underrating Kentucky a little bit in the sense that Will Levis didn't play against South Carolina and they had a brutally bad game there. They lost to a South Carolina team that I still don't think is good, even though they beat Texas A&M this past week.
Are you saying that snaps off of guys' heads are not super predictive in telling us how good teams are?
Yeah, probably not. But yeah. So anyways, the way my system works, I mean, a Kentucky team with Will Levis is probably better than where my system has them at this point. And yes, so the pass offensive numbers don't look good for Kentucky. Will Levis is still considered an NFL prospect.
Right.
I'm not sure that I buy that, but people who know a lot more than me have him in the first round of the next NFL draft. And Tennessee really struggles on pass defense. So I think all those things conspire for me. And maybe a little bit of like, you probably didn't get into your preparation like you usually do after just an amazingly emotional win over Alabama. But that's the smallest factor. So I do, this game was Tennessee minus 13 on Sunday. It's come down to 12.5. I think it's going to come down more. So I like Kentucky plus 12.5 here.
I totally agree with you. If any reason, the Mississippi State result was shocking to me. Mississippi State's pass offense was humming on all cylinders, and Will Rogers, they got nothing doing against Kentucky a couple of weeks ago. I believe that was a couple of weeks ago at this point. They didn't get anything going in an air raid offense. Tennessee, very similar system. They play much faster. They will mix in more of a run game than Mike Leach's system down there in Mississippi State. But it's something I'd be concerned about to back Tennessee for sure.
Yeah, Are we considering the fact that Tennessee's wearing black uniforms this week? I feel like that's a bit underrated in what we're discussing. They're wearing black helmets with still the orange, and they look good. Ed, do your numbers factor that in or no?
The numbers do not factor in the color of the helmets.
Nor
do they factor in having a game between Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah. Yep. They did have the one game against Tennessee Martin, I think it was, between there too, but kind of like a pseudo bye week. Yeah, a pseudo bye week, not really a bye week. And they did let up 24 points in that game. So, maybe there's some credence to that for sure. But they do have Georgia next week. That is still a very big game. We'll see how that one plays out. It's going to be a fun game either way.
They're going to be a pretty big dog in that game.
Probably.
They're going to be a big dog in that game. Everyone's kind of talking about Tennessee and Alabama rematch. No. We got a long way to go. They got a long way to go before they get back there.
There's a fascinating setup here where I believe you could have one loss with each, in that Tennessee first one out, Alabama SEC championship, and then Georgia SEC championship loser, and then deciding which teams go into the college football playoff from there. Good luck, because now Tennessee's got the head-to-head over Alabama, who would be the SEC conference champion at that point. So wild scenario that could be.
Wait, what's the scenario?
So technically you would look, Tennessee would then I'm trying to remember. This is what you shouldn't espouse off of what you saw on Twitter. Alabama would then get back in. Alabama wins the West, makes the SEC championship game. They take it on undefeated Georgia. Tennessee's one loss comes to Georgia next week. And then Alabama would be the title challenger, but Tennessee's got the head-to-head win. So it'd be very interesting to see who would argue for that game there.
I mean, that's honestly probably the most likely scenario.
Yes.
Right?
Which is a doomsday scenario. And I wanted to let you know, Jim, I've also boosted Jalen Hyatt's fantasy outlook this week 5 points just because of the uniforms. I didn't look. I boosted his projection just based off the Halloween uniforms.
I did use him in that Alabama game for my DFS lineup because of your write-up on numberFire. I want you to know that. His 5 touchdown game. I thought I was going to have a very good night, and then the late games really kind of skewered me, but it was still profitable. So check out those over at numberFire, and check out all of Austin's work over there as well. That is Austin Swaim. Check him out on Twitter at @Swaim3. Austin, we appreciate the time. Good to have you on here for the first and not the last time. We'll talk some UFC eventually as well. And good luck to you in week number 9.
Thanks. Good luck to you guys too.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. Ed is on Twitter at the Power Rank. You can find his work over thepowerrank.com and the Football Analytics Show. Ed, what is going on for you this week over there?
I had Adam Chernoff on the podcast. He has worked as a bookmaker, pro bettor, was at Covers, recently moved over to Right Angle Sports. So great conversation, tons of NFL insights. Get that at the Football Analytics Show, wherever you get your podcasts.
Alrighty, and Ed's work is over at thepowerrank.com, and as I said, he's on Twitter at thepowerrank. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. Once again, do not forget to subscribe to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts, and also up on the FanDuel YouTube page. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down week number 8 in the NFL. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.